Okay.
Welcome back, everyone. In this lesson, we are going to begin to create our enemy. Now, the enemy will be able to chase after the player, and we're actually going to be using pathfinding. Unity has a built-in pathfinding system called navmesh, and at the bottom right image you can see this is what the navigational plane looks like. All that blue sort of like highlight above the ground is where the enemies can walk, and as you can see, the obstacles have a sort of a buffer around them where the enemies can walk around that. And yep, we'll be using that system to be able to chase after the player. And once the enemy gets to a certain distance from the player, they'll stop moving and begin shooting at the player. And just like the player, the enemy will be able to take damage. And when they die, the player's score will increase. We will be working on the score a bit later, though. For now, we'll just be working on the enemy movement and shooting logic. And in fact, the shooting is just going to be using the same weapon script as the player to spawn the bullets and attack the player. So let's hop back into Unity and create our enemy. Here I am in Unity, and I'm going to go to the scene view here, and
Wait, what? Wait. Lessons back.
welcome back, everyone. In this lesson, we are
Oh!
going to be implementing object pool. Fairly expensive, and if you use
Pantesan.
is it recycles but after a while of shooting and playing the game, it would get to a point where there are a lot of objects waiting.
Abi, beda banget yang ini sama ini yang bukan sama orang yang beda, terus sama beda-beda grafiknya.
Apa kamu dari awal lagi?
Iya kayaknya.
Mungkin dari fitting di player controller, coba lihat kalau ada yang beda langsung ikutin kalau. Soalnya itu versi lama.
Welcome back, everyone. In this lesson, we are going to be creating our player controller. Now, this player controller will allow us to move around the map, jump, look around with the camera, as well as allow us to shoot our weapon. We will two images of what it will look like. On the left is what will be seen through our camera view in the final version of the game, and on the right, the scene view. We have collisions. Let's hop inside of Unity and begin to create our player controller. Alright, inside of Unity here, we want to first of all make sure that we are inside the game scene. We are, so let's hop into the scene view here. And what we want to do, first of all, is sort of platform for our player, because if we create the play controller now, we'll just fall right through in the sky. We won't know if we're moving, we won't know if we're falling, so we need something to stand on first of all, and also something. So and create a new empty object, and I'm going to call this one _map. Now, this empty game object isn't going to be anything per se, it's more going to be a container. It's going to be a container that is going to be holding all of our map objects set to 000, just center and easy to work with. And I'm also my tool to the move tool, because on the rect tool, we don't need to change. Now, as a child of main camera, click on the map, and I'm going to go 3D object cube. And this will create a new cube, and this is what we're going to be using for the ground. I'll change the scale to about 20 by 20 by, let's go 20 by 2 by 20. So we have a nice large platform here. And now with that done, we can actually create our player controller. So I'm going to right click here in the hierarchy and go 3D object capsule. And here we go. We've got our player capsule right here. For now, we are going to use a capsule for both the enemy and the player. We've got our player capsule and go 3D object capsule. And here we go. We've got our player capsule right here. For now, we are going to use a capsule for both the enemy and the player. With later on, we will be implementing the final models, so it does look a bit nicer. Let's set this position to 000 with a Y position of 2, so that the player is now sitting on top of the cube like so.
Beda.
You may know.
Lihat, Bi, ada kapsul loh.
Udah apa nak pilih?
Kayak nggak tahu.
Notice that the shadows look kind of odd. It does seem there's this orangey grey tint and the shadows are pitch black. And the reason for this is because of the lighting. We need to go into the lighting menu here. If you don't have this menu up already, you can open it by going to Window, Rendering, then Lighting Settings, and this should open up the lighting window here. And all we want to do is click on Auto Generate down here. And what this will do is auto generate the lighting whenever there's a change in the scene. So just click on that lighting window here. Rendering,
Window. Rendering. Lighting setting.
And she promises the earth to me, and I believe her. All this time I don't know why.
then lighting settings, and this should open up the lighting window here. And all we want to do is click on auto generate down here. And what this will do is auto generate the lighting whenever there's a change in the scene. So just click on that.
Aduh.
Kenapa?
Ini katanya window, rendering, lighting setting, tapi nggak ada apa-apa. Tadi harusnya ada di sini.
Doesn't take too long. Generate the lighting whenever it is.
Gak ada
Click
muncul
on
dia.
auto
Oh, wait.
Nah, di situ dia pasti muncul di
Di sini.
lewat Budi.
Hah?
generate down
Oh, di
here.
sini munculnya.
Mana?
Nih window tuh.
Oh, ya, secara aja. Ini klik situ, tempel situ. Tabnya di select, klik lighting, taruh situ inspector. Nah,
And what this will do is auto generate the lighting whenever there's a change in the scene. So just click on that. Shouldn't take too long. And there we go. Everything is set up the way it should be. This may also already be ticked for you, but for me it wasn't, so we just need to make sure that we have auto generate on. Alright, with that we can go back to our inspector, and what we are going to do now is set up some materials for the ground. We don't need material for the player, since the player is, go to our materials folder. I'm going to right click here, go create, material ground. Oops. Right, we can just drag it on like so. And we want this to be a sort of green grass sort of material, something that could be outdoors. So I'm going to lower this first of all, since we don't need a preview that large. And I'm going to change the smoothness all the way down to 0. Since we don't want it to be really shiny, we want it to be sort of a flat color. And with the smoothness down to 0, let's click on the albedo here, and we're going to change the albedo color to a green. So let's change to green, see what sort of green we want. Yep, something like that, I'd say. Let's have a look in the game view. Oh, we can't actually see anything in the game view right now, so let's go back to our scene view. And what we want to do is click on our capsule here, and I'm going to rename this to player. Now let's attach the camera to the player. So I'm going to click on the main camera, drag that in as a child to the player here, and I'm going to set the camera's position to 0, 0, 0, 0. So it's right in the center of the player here. Click on the main camera, drag that in as a child to the player. So I'm going to click on the main camera, drag that in as a child to the player here. And I'm going to set the camera's position to 0, 0, 0, 0. So it's right in the center of the player here. But we want it on top of the player's
Kayak pusing.
kenapa?
Susah, beda banget.
head. So let's set the Y position here to 1.
Ya, dipelajari
And
aja.
if we look in the game view, this is what the player will be seeing. Now, with that done, what we need to do is click on our player and add one more component that we need. Because right now, if we were to press play or if we were to implement our movement and all that, nothing would really happen because there is no physics being applied to our player. If we were to jump up in the air, it wouldn't work. If we were going to walk off the edge, we wouldn't fall over. And that is because we need a rigid body add component, and I'm going to find a rigid body. And this will basically apply physics to our player, allow our player to fall over, allow us to move by changing the velocity of the player, all the sort of physics stuff that you would expect from a real-life object inside of a world determined by physics. But something we do want to do with this is open up the constraints pop down here. And with this, what we want to do is freeze the X, Y, and Z rotation. And the reason for that is because if we were to just leave that alone, set up our movement, and move around, we would eventually fall over sideways. And we do not want our player to be falling over sideways, as that would basically ruin the game for us. We wouldn't be able to get back up. So we are going to be freezing the X, Y, and Z rotations. The Y rotation, we will be manually chain face wherever the camera look. But yep, and apart from that, we need to do is set up a simple little gun model for us so that we can see sort of a visual representation of where we're aiming at. Okay, so as a child of the main camera, and the reason why we're doing it as a child of the main camera and not the player is because if we were to look horizontally, for example, the gun would stay there, but if we look up, we need the gun to also move up as well. So we need to pretty much track wherever the camera is looking. So as a child of main camera, what I'm going to do is create a new empty object, and I'm going to call this one our weapon.
Oh, okay. Player, main camera, kita main camera.
And
Halo Mas Pram. Kamu sekarang gemuk
and then let's move this weapon forward a bit here. The blue axis is the forward axis. This is where we're looking right now, and this is where we're going to be looking. We're always going to have this blue axis face.
Zaman kuliah di apanya? Kamera, bentar. Ntar aku nyiapin kamera dulu. Halo semua, halo. Ya, Bandung gimana Bandung? Surabaya ya, oke. Kok aku ingatnya Bandung sih? Mas Budi ya, oke Mas Budi. Nice. Kita kumpulin teman-teman sebelum beres-beres dulu ya. Apa Mas? Apa ini? Sudah lama pengen ada hal seperti ini, jadi aku pengen dapat masukan terus nyampein
Facing forward, which is the Z axis, which is the forward axis. So as a child of weapon then, I'm going to create a new 3D object cube here. It's pretty large, so let's bring it down to a 0.1 scale. I'm also going to remove the box collider, as we don't need a collider on our weapon, and it might actually interfere with our bullets when we start shooting them. So we can look in the game view now and see that we have our cube right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the weapon here, and I'm going to position it down so this weapon is pretty much down at the bottom of our screen and a bit to the right. So I'm going to set this y to maybe negative 0.2. Let's set the z, let's bring it a bit close to us. We'll go 0.5. Let's bring this x to now 0.1, 0.2. We'll set to 0.2 there. And now what we can do is start to model our gun. Now, we don't have to be too complex with this model. It's just going to be a nice, simple model. So I'm going to get the cube here, and I'm going to press R to go to the scaling tool. And this will allow us to pretty much just resize this however we want. So I'm just going to resize it a bit like that, so it's got a bit of a barrel. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this. And to do that, we can just go Control D, and it creates another cube here, which is the exact same. And I'm going to move it on the axis here. So what I can do is click on this red square here, and you see it moves on the x-axis like so. So I'm going to move it down here. Let's actually move the weapon forward a bit for now so I can model the handle. I'm going to press R to go to the rotate tool, and I'm going to rotate it along the x-axis here, so it is a bit like this red square here, and so it's got a bit of a barrel. I'm going to press R gun. Now, you don't have to be too complex with this model. It's just going to be a nice, simple model. So I'm going to get the cube here, and I'm going to
Oke, Mas Gita itu persiapan nampol nyamuk ya kayaknya.
press R to go to the scaling tool, and this will allow us to pretty much just resize this however we want. So I'm just going to resize it a bit like that, so it's got a bit of a barrel.
Member di sini nggak bisa auto approve gitu ya di Google Meet itu. Organization ya. Apa-apa. Kita di sini berapa sih maksimal Google Meet itu? Apa sih ya?
Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this, and to do that we can just go Control D, and it creates a nice simple model. We'll go 0.5 cube right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the weapon here, and I'm going to position it down so this weapon is pretty much down at the bottom of our screen and a bit to the right. So I'm going to set this Y to maybe negative 0.2.
Kita mulai 3 menit lagi ya, 8:05.
Set the Z, let's bring it a bit close to us. We'll go 0.5. Let's bring this X to now 0.1, 0.2.
Kita mulai 2 menit lagi. Siap-siap.
Set the 0.2 there.
Introduction
Now,
dulu deh dari siapa, nama, tinggal di mana, sekarang kesibukannya apa, dan statusnya sekarang apa, sedang belajar, sudah ada Muslim work atau masih hunting. Oke, coba silakan aja, aku ambil dari grup A lah ya, Mas Adsen. Adi Ensen, Mas, monggo. Ya.
What we can do is start to model our gun. Now, we don't have to be too complex with this model. It's just going to be a nice, simple model. So I'm going to get the cube here, and I'm going to press R to go to the scaling tool, and this will allow us to pretty much just resize this however. I'm just going to resize it a bit like that, so it's got a bit of a barrel. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this, and to do that we can just go Control G, and it creates another cube here, which is the exact same. And I'm going to move it on the axis here. So what I can do is click on this red square here, and you see it moves on the x-axis like so. So I'm going to move it down here. Let's actually move the weapon forward a bit for now, so I can wiggle the handle. I'm going to press R to go to the rotate tool, and I'm going to rotate it along the... the x-axis here, so it is a bit like that maybe. Let's go back to the scaling tool by pressing R. Click on the white square to uniformly scale it down or up. I'm going to scale it down about there.
Tapi di sini punya banyak sekali loh ya, teman-teman yang sudah kerja di startup besar. Kalian tahu aja ada member yang gabung dan sebagainya. Kita mungkin nanti bisa adain semacam bagi pengalaman deh. Kan seru banget teman-teman yang belum kebayang gimana.
Move it back over here.
Unicorn gitu, bisa mulai kita. Oke, nanti lagi banget ya. Oke, Mas Dede, coba Mas introduction sedikit Mas. Tapi kayaknya masih lagi rame acara keluarga ya. Kita Mas Dede di skip dulu lagi sini. Oke, Mas Ferry, mau nggak Mas Ferry?
There we go. We've got our weapon here.
Upgrade skill ya. Iya kan usia berapa Mas? 19 atau 18? 19 kamu. Oke. Teman Mas Ferry itu sedang saya training menjadi developer di .id. Jadi Mas Ferry membantu banyak hal terkait course. Nah, kalau ada pertanyaan, kenapa Mas Ferry paling cepat jawab ya? Karena emang tugas. Juga Mas lagi ngembangin banyak bot dan sebagainya. Mas Ferry potensial banget. Jadi Mas Ferry contoh kasus di mana kuliah itu dalam hal kebutuhan skill untuk menembus work. Nomor 2, utamanya adalah
now let's also make a material for our gun. So I'm going to create a new material here in our materials folder, and this is going to be called weapon. And then we can just apply it to both of our cubes. So cube 1 and the cube. I'm going to change the smoothness down to 0 again, since we don't want it really to be shiny. And for the albedo, we'll just change this.
Mas Ferry sudah dibimbing Mas Aki. Nah, aku ngambil Mas Ferry untuk bantu di sini. Oke, thank you Mas Ferry. Right, Mas Gita, your turn.
To a gray like so.
Pembunuhan apa itu?
All right, we can go back into the game view. Click on our weapon, and I'm just going to position it where it looks best. So let's try 0.6 on the x-axis, on the z position, I mean. For the y, we'll go negative point, let's say 2. Yeah, so we'll just keep it like that for now.
Alright. Sudah sekarang stat attribute-nya banyak sekali ya. Banyak, luar biasa loh, luar biasa banget ya. Okay.
And there we go. That is our player controller pretty much set up and ready to go. In the next lesson, we'll start to script our player controller, so we're going to be able to move around, jump, and actually look around as well with the camera. So yeah, I'll see you all then in the next lesson.
Alright. Oke, thank you Mas. Mas Hamam, thank you banget. Kapan-kapan kalau sudah normal lagi kita bisa semacam apa ya?
Welcome back everyone. In this lesson, we are going to start to script our player. So, first thing we're going to do is go to our scripts folder that we created earlier on. And inside of here, we want to create a new C# script. And we'll call this one our player. And this, of course, is going to manage stuff like movement, jumping, looking around the camera, taking damage, and then dying, as well as also later on when we implement pickups, it will allow us to give health and give ammo as well. Okay, so let's click on our player here, our player object, and we just want to drag our player script onto the object like so. Now we can open it up inside of Visual Studio by double clicking on the script here. So we're in the script now, and the first thing I want to do is actually to list out some of the variables that
Pakai apa? Kamu pakai apa? Kamu backend atau frontend?
tag on top of here. So when we have a large list of variables, dividing Welcome back everyone. In this lesson, we are going to be continuing on.
Okay. Itu kamu nanti bisa dibantu Mas Ilham, Mas mana? Oh hilang ya. Mas Ferry. Oh ada di sini. Kamu bisa dibantu Mas Ferry nanti. Ya betul Mas.
Welcome back everyone. In this lesson, we are going to be setting up our weapon to allow us to shoot the gun that our player has. Now, we're not going to be doing this inside of the player script like we have with the movement, the jumping, and the mouse look. What we're going to do is create a separate script called weapon. And the reason for this is because we're also going to use this weapon script for the enemy. So the enemy and the player are going to be using the same script. And this will just prevent us from having to write the exact same code multiple times in both scripts. So let's create a new script in our scripts folder, and we are going to call this one weapon. Let's also, at this time, attach this to the player object as well, since they will be needing the weapon. So we'll just drag this onto the player right here. And while we're at it, let's also make a muzzle for the player, because inside of the weapon script, we'll need to know where we basically fire the bullets from. So inside of our player, actually inside of the weapon object, let's create a new empty game object and call this one our muzzle. Now I'm going to go close here, and you see that the muzzle is about there, so I'm going to just move it forward a bit so it's just outside of the gun like so.
Misalnya contohnya kalau ada kasus scraping dan kamu nemuin solusinya, dan kadang-kadang bisa kamu temukan secara trivial. Maksudnya kamu ngulik-ngulik cara sendiri, menemukan sendiri, nah itu ciri-ciri kamu bisa untuk menembus remote work. Nah sampai tahap seperti itu, nah kamu akan bisa confident untuk apply job yang remote work. Oke Mas Andre, belum ya? Oke. Aku emang ngebangun semacam cepat untuk nembus remote work. Kalau nggak lewat jalurnya lebih rumit lagi. Contoh misalnya kamu ngebangun, seperti Mas Ilham ya, Mas Ilham sekarang lagi belajar ngebangun aplikasi kayak RESTful framework. Itu sebenarnya yang paling besar.
There we go. It looks like a good place for the bullets to spawn. We'll keep it like that. And let's open up the weapon script now and start scripting. The first thing I want to do is create our variables. So we're going to have a public game object for our bullet prefab, because we of course need to create a object.
Untuk nembus sampai puluhan ratusan dolar per jam itu aja. Kenapa? Karena teknis nggak susah, tapi data itu yang penting. Jadi perusahaan butuh data yang penting dan dia
for our bullet, and this is what will be spawning from the muzzle of our gun and basically pushing forwards. Then we need
Mereka akan
to access the
caranya bagaimana itu juga programmer aja, tapi bagaimana itu didapatkan namanya. Oke. Alright. Beda-beda. Kan nggak butuh softwarenya. Kalau manusia itu atau orangnya itu konsumsi data aja, CSV-nya aja, atau CSS ya, CSV. Tapi kalau program yang kontak itu biasanya programmer juga, dia butuh jalan sendiri. Nanti kamu kasih kodenya. Jadi dua itu cuman yang CSV-nya aja.
the muzzle component. So this will be transform, and this will just be a muzzle. And now we need to keep track of our ammo. So we're going
Kamu harus
to have our public integer for our current ammo. So how much ammo do we currently have on us?
Ngobrol dulu nanti. Kalau datanya diambil gitu. Kalau di deskripsi kadang-kadang dia rahasia juga sih. Dia nggak akan banyak.
Oke, kita udah ketemu.
Next, Mas Abdurrafi. Oke. Masuk, aman.